Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Janina Scarlet. I'm a clinical psychologist, author, and a full time geek. And today I want to talk to you about the psychology of horror. Supernatural, Walking Dead, Stranger Things, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, what do they all have in common? Well, for starters, of course, there's the thrill of the horror. There's the thrill of seeing whether or not your beloved characters are going to survive. But there's something more. In fact, many people report that horror helps them to really bond with the survivors. For many people who are going through a hard time, whether it's experiencing trauma, going through depression, going through a horrific loss, they might feel alone. But seeing a character that is also going through a hard time, or characters that are going through something even worse, characters that are surviving a zombie apocalypse or having to fight demons in the underworld, allow us to feel like maybe, just maybe, what we're going through might be tolerable. For many people, it's the idea that no matter what happens, we can get through it. It's the idea that just like the characters in The Walking Dead, we might find our tribe. It's the idea that maybe just like the characters on Supernatural, we might be able to find other hunters out there so that we can face some of our own internal monsters too. And for many individuals, watching horror films, television shows gives us the emotional vocabulary to be able to express what we're going through. Years ago, I was working at Camp Pendleton. It's a military base where I was working with active duty Marines who just returned from Afghanistan or Iraq. These are the individuals who've seen real life horror films coming true in real lives. And when I would ask them what it was like for them to be in combat, what it was like for them to see people that they knew, people that they loved, their best friends, their closest companions being killed right in front of them. Rather than talking about their emotional state, many would use a metaphor. They would say, "You know how it felt? It felt like a scene from The Walking Dead. It felt like the world was ending. I felt powerless to stop it, and it felt like things will never get better." And it was really interesting because using these metaphors, the individuals that I was working with were able to relay just how much trauma they were experiencing. Being able to identify with characters like Rick, for example, a lot of individuals reported that they felt like there was somebody out there that understood them. For many, television shows also address important social issues. Whether we're watching The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina or Winona Earp or Grimm, a lot of times we as viewers might see something we already feel passionate about represented in a medium that we already like, in a way that can give us the representation of this particular issue or allow us to see how we might be able to take action. Whether it's standing up against misogyny, whether it's standing against racism, whether it's supporting the LGBTQIA community, a lot of these shows depict the issues that many of us already fight for and already believe in ways that we can get behind and in ways that we can use to support one another if we're going through the same kind of experiences. And more than anything else, individuals report that television shows, especially television shows that depict trauma and horror, allow them to experience a kind of a surrogate support group. For example, individuals watching Stranger Things, Supernatural, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and other related shows report that when they're experiencing the biggest, most loneliest, most excruciating experiences, when they're able to watch these shows, they feel a little bit less alone. In fact, For a lot of individuals, watching these shows can allow them to identify and name an emotion that they've gone through that they might have never been able to understand before. For example, one of the clients that I was working with, let's call her Kelly. Kelly reported that watching Supernatural allowed her for the first time in her life to realize just how lonely she felt in struggling to face her own internal demons. Kelly had been struggling with depression and social anxiety after a history of severe bullying and after alienation from some of her family members. Well, when Kelly and I started working together, I asked her to think about her origin story. She thought of her origin story as an event that occurred in her elementary school. She remembered there being a teacher who embarrassed her in front of her entire class, and how other students in her class started making fun of her specifically because of that event. In a lot of ways, her life became a real life horror story where everywhere she went, she was called different kinds of nicknames and she was made fun of. By the time Kelly got to high school, she had a really difficult time just going into school. If she ever had to do a presentation, she would miss class and take an F over being able to stand in front of her class for even an idea of potentially having somebody make fun of her. So, in writing out her origin story, in writing out the event that started it all, the embarrassment and the bullying that Kelly went through, she was able to realize that although this is her origin story, that just like some of her beloved characters in Supernatural, the origin story is just that. It's the beginning of our heroic journey, and the rest of our choices are up to us. If you have seen Supernatural, you might remember the series starting out with two characters, two brothers, Sam and Dean Winchester, who in the beginning of the series tragically lose their mother who is killed by a terrible demon. And it is after this event, and largely because of this event, that the brothers and their father become hunters. They kill kind of horrific and terrible supernatural monsters, including demons and werewolves, in order to protect humankind from facing the kind of traumas and losses that they have been through. So, as Kelly and I started working together, she reported that most of her life, she didn't feel supported or understood by anybody except for fictional characters. So, when I asked her if Kelly has a personal hero, that was easy. She reported that her personal hero was Dean Winchester. So, Dean was the older brother of the two brothers from the Supernatural, and he was one that often felt like he was alone in his experiences. In the series, Dean often has to hide his pain in order to take care of everyone else around him, including his younger brother. Well, Callie often felt like she had to put away her own emotional experiences in order to take care of her brother, who in turn was also struggling with his own internal monsters. In identifying Dean Winchester as her own personal hero, who was able to face different kind of horrific experiences and use them to help other people, I asked Kelly to imagine what would happen if Dean Winchester was to talk to her in real life. I asked her to imagine that she had a few minutes alone with Dean, and I asked her to imagine what Dean might say to her. Well, Kelly was in tears as she wrote down what she imagined Dean might say. She said that Dean would remind her that she too has faced some really horrific experiences, that sometimes being alone and being bullied can feel like we're facing a demon, that being one on one with our depression monsters can feel very much like a zombie apocalypse, and that in facing all of these monsters that she has for many years of her life, that Kelly already a monster hunter. So with that, Kelly said that she wanted to be just like Dean. She wanted to learn skills to help her become her own version of a monster hunter. And so Very much like Sam and Dean in facing their biggest fears in in saving the world, Kelly and I practiced together to face her own monsters. We practiced going to the mall. We practiced talking to other people and having her sit alone in the middle of a food court without looking at her phone, just to be able to see what it felt like to face her loneliness, to be the center of attention, to be in the presence of other people instead of running away. We even practiced doing really silly and also terrifying things, such as going into different kinds of stores and asking if they have any kind of supernatural activity. For anyone with social anxiety, you might imagine that asking silly questions might be one of the most terrifying and horrific things that you might ever be asked to do. Well, for Kelly, although she was terrified of doing it, over time she realized that this experience was actually hilarious. The kind of responses she got were either strange looks from the store owners or an enthusiastic, yes, I've been meaning to call somebody about it. And over time, Kelly started realizing that just like Sam and Dean, she was able to face her monsters. I'll never forget the first day that Kelly was going back to school. We were on the phone. She felt really ill. In fact, she threw up on the way to school, but she went. And that first day, she showed up to her first class. The next day, Kelly stayed for two classes. And after that, Kelly stayed for the entire day. And when I asked her what was most helpful in her facing the biggest, most terrifying experience of her life, she reported it was imagining Dean Winchester right by her side, facing the monsters alongside her. The truth is, we all have some kind of monsters that we face. There are some people who just get up and go to work. But for the rest of us, we have to fight like five dragons just to get out of bed. And so, if you're fighting like five dragons with one hand and maybe you're working on a report with another hand, then it makes sense that your report might be less pristine than it otherwise would have been had you not been fighting all those dragons. But the truth is, the very fact that you've shown up as much as you have is already impressive because struggling is not a weakness. It is the foundation of your greatest strength. Just like the survivors in The Walking Dead, just like the vampire slayers in Supernatural or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, just like the courageous kids of Stranger Things, these shows serve as a reminder that heroes are not those who never face any obstacles and easily defeat all those villains. No, heroes are just like you. Heroes are those individuals who show up time and time and time again, no matter how terrified they are, no matter how tired, exhausted, and overwhelmed they are, and even though they might not believe that they can succeed. Chances are you've probably supported and helped more people in your life than you might realize. And so I'm going to ask you to think about a personal story that you might have too, a personal struggle that maybe you faced at one point of your life, or maybe still face to this day. Maybe you have a phobia. Maybe you are struggling with anxiety attacks or an eating disorder or addiction. Maybe you've been through something really horrific that you've never told anyone about. Whatever you're going through, just like your favorite characters, this experience, this is your origin story. It does not make you a victim. It makes you a survivor. And just like your favorite characters, this too is your jumping off point. The rest is up to you. So, knowing your own origin story, I'm going to ask you to imagine your favorite character from your favorite horror series, TV show, or a movie, somebody that you look up to, a survivor, somebody that's been through some really tough and horrific situations. Maybe you will think of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Maybe you will think of Winona Earp from the Winona Earp series. Think of somebody that you truly look up to. And imagine for a moment that you have 10 minutes along with your hero. Your hero already knows your origin story, and you don't even have to explain yourself. Your hero already understands you, believes you, and supports you. And if your hero had the most compassionate, supportive, and encouraging message for you, what might your hero say to you? Maybe your hero would remind you of how incredibly courageous you are and how many gifts you have to give back to other people, whether it's your kindness, your patience, your generosity, or your creativity. Because very often we get so caught up in our pain that we forget that there's so much we have to offer. I want to tell you about Jessica. Jessica is not this person's real name. Jessica was brought in by her parents after she was sexually assaulted by her boyfriend. Jessica's parents could not understand why she was so traumatized. After all, they said he was her boyfriend. And they could not understand why, even 6 months after the assault, Jessica was still overwhelmed by her trauma symptoms. By the time I started working with Jessica, she was almost mute. She had a really hard time communicating. She could barely speak. And if I asked her anything about her assault, she would shut down. But Jessica was willing to talk about one thing. She was willing to talk about her favorite teen horror TV show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In case you're not familiar with the show, it's a show about a teenage girl called Buffy Summers, who is a high school student by day and a vampire slayer by night. And so we spent a few sessions just talking about her beloved episodes, where Jessica shared with me how she looked up to Buffy, how Buffy represented a figure of inner strength and wisdom and passion for her, and how courageous Buffy was. And so I asked Jessica if there was ever a time that Buffy had been through something painful too. And she said there was. And I asked Jessica what Buffy did when she had been through this amount of trauma. She said that one of the things that Buffy did was confide in one of her friends. And so I asked Jessica if we could watch this clip together. So on her phone, Jessica pulled up her YouTube channel and she pulled up the clip where Buffy is confiding in her friend Spike about what she's going through. And she tells him that every moment that she's going through after this horrific trauma that she went through feels like hell. That every moment hurts from one moment to the next, and she doesn't know how she'll get through. And it was in that moment that Jessica pointed to the screen and she said, that's what I go through every day. It was because of this television show that Jessica was able to regain her voice, that she was able to verbalize not only to me, but later to her parents about how much pain she was in. She was able to show that entire episode to her parents that night, who for the first time were able to understand the true horror of their daughter's experience. And over time, I asked Jessica, what would Buffy tell her if she could have a few moments of Jessica's time? Jessica thought about it and she said, Buffy would tell me never to give up, to continue slaying my own inner monsters, and also maybe to have conversations with others. And so, because of this, because of her own hero, Buffy, Jessica decided to tell her best friend about what happened to her. She told her friend about the sexual abuse that she went through, and she told her friend about how she felt alone. Well, much to Jessica's surprise, her friend burst into tears and she said, "Me too." Jessica didn't know that her friend had been sexually assaulted as well because neither one of them was able to share it with the other. And it was because of this television show that Jessica got the courage and the skills to share her experiences with other people. And so, what I wanted to tell you is this: if you find yourself spending hours watching television shows that have horror or some kind of horrific elements to them, you're not alone. There are probably many reasons why you like these movies and television shows, or perhaps games or books. They serve a purpose. Of course, thrill and excitement is a part of it, but there is a bigger reason. These kind of stories allow us to remember that we're not alone. They allow us to remember that we too are survivors. And what I wanted you to remember is this: just like your favorite heroes, you too are the chosen one. You are the hero of your own story. You are the slayer of your own inner dragons and your own inner vampires. And just like your own personal heroes, you serve as a hero to somebody else. You might not even realize it, but chances are there's somebody out there whose life you've saved or forever changed by something kind that you did back when this person was facing their own inner monsters. And you might not even realize it because this person might never think to tell you just how much your kindness or generosity has helped them. And so, my point is this: every single one of you is a warrior in your own horror film. You are a survivor, you're a hero, and a dragon slayer. And please remember that every day you make a difference. You have a gift to share with the world, whether it's a gift of your own experience or your own survivorship, the gift of your kindness, your creativity, your generosity. You have what it takes to make a difference not only in your own life, but in the lives of other people. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being wonderful.